On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome inside the Blackwood Broadcasting Studios at an undisclosed Institute of Higher Learning. This is The Jake Feinberg Show. So happy to be part of the program today. The drums tell stories when played by masters. The traditional chanting with the drums elicits the spiritual sanctuary of slaves aboard ships sailing from Mother Africa to the islands. The slaves communicated amongst themselves, staying in the moment, keeping spirits high as they could be. The drum and its rhythms made their way through the steel bands of the Bahamas and Danny Ray playing Cungas at some Pink Flamingo Hotel in Miami Beach, along the way to Armando Peraza and George Shearin, or Chano, Pozo, and Dizzy Gillespie. But what about the stories, the poems, the clave beat in Congo Square, or Wayne State, where my guest attended school? When traditional earthy Afro-Centric Jazzers were exploring free music, totally unencumbered by time, the total African-American experience, in the moment, all the time, every day. My guest today is a creator, forever creating. His spirit transcends his own being. Some people wait a whole lifetime to figure this out. My guest started realizing his true nature back when Frank Strazzeri and Jimmy McGriff and Willis Jackson were blowing up Rochester at the social club his mom ran. At Wayne State, the neighborhoods were communities, tribes with different factions, but an understanding of the music. The power of the music and the sophistication of the music. It might have been at the Jockey Club with Jimmy Smith and Donald Bailey, or at the London House where Ed Thigpen held down the groove with Oscar Peterson and Ray Brown. The music and the rhythms have always been suppressed in the United States, which is why my guest is no longer living here. He lives in France, where music is an inherent part of the cultural fabric of the people. It's a multicolored fabric that reaches all across the world and acknowledges the great black musicians, artists, and entertainers. If you want to make $5 trillion and be obligated to give nothing back to the culture, then the U.S. is the place to be. If you want to be recognized and appreciated as an artist within a successful non-communist system, most African musicians move to Europe. All of a sudden, we as a country are having big discussions about race. My guest felt this, saw this, experienced this decades ago and bounced out of here. He dug the Midwest, what with his unheralded black artist group of St. Louis, when Dizzy and Blakey and Elvin were still circulating the globe, searching for that magic triangle of sound. My guest left an imprint with the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians and the Arts Ensemble of Chicago, which pleasured audiences here in the States and abroad, what with their colorful attire, storytelling, and sheer creative genius that told the story of their people, a story getting lost in the homogenization of the Americas. My guest believes his number one goal is to please the audience, educate those whose ears are open, and play on in the memory of Roy Brooks and Tony Williams and Buddy Rich and Joe Jones and Art Blakey and, well, Famoudou Don Moye. What an honor. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, hello, Jake. How's everything? Where are you?
In Tucson.
Oh, okay, Tucson. I got fond memories of Tucson because Jarman's family was living there back in the 70s and the 80s.
And so you guys came down here and gigged a lot?
Not gigging. We went down there and stayed. His mother was living there, so whenever we were going back and forth to California, we would stop there. We had an old Greyhound bus, 1951 Greyhound, and Tucson was one of our pit stops for R&R and a good home-cooked meal and just chill out from the rigors of Highway 10.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. So if the circuit, was it a traditional like Southwest circuit? You go Texas to Arizona up to California?
We played, the only time we played Houston, we played the Armadillo in, let me see what I'm trying to remember, with Austin, I think that was. Did you ever hear of the Armadillo?
No, I've never heard of that.
They used to have a Monday night series there, jazz. They had Ornette Coleman there and Sun Ra and the Art Ensemble. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Austin, Texas. But we played Houston, the Miller Outdoor Theater a few times. There was a guy named Lanny Brooks, I think. Lanny. This is back in the 70s. He was booking jazz concerts there, so we used to go there. But like I said, we made that stop often, going to California, going and coming. We would go through Tucson and also Tucumcari, New Mexico, which had the greatest Mexican restaurant we had ever found.
It's such an honor to talk to you, man. I really want to start out. Can you talk a little bit about when you say it was your mom had a social club? What did that mean exactly? What was a social club?
What'd you say?
Back in Rochester, your mom had a social club where you got a chance.
Oh, my grandmother was part of the Daughters of the Eastern Star and the Knights of the Pithod, and they had a place called the Pithod Lounge, which was a jazz club there, next door to the Elks Club, the Benevolent Fraternal Order of the Elks. That was the male organization, and the Daughters of the Eastern Star was the female organization.
So
and they had a big band, and they had a marching band, and they had majorettes and drummers, and they would have the conventions every year. It was a social club, and it was part of the Masonic order, the Black Masons.
Could you, and you were just a boy it's fair to say you were just a kid, and you were coming in and you were able to see, we'll talk about some of the early experiences that had a profound effect on you playing,
excuse me.
Go ahead. No, you hear stories about, Kenny Burrell, who I just talked to yesterday. The guy is still doing it, but yet his name is thrown out there, Jimmy McGriff and all these other cats. And from a young age in a place like Rochester, which had the Eastman School and all this other great, vibrant music, I just wanted you to talk about some of those early memories that really gripped you.
Well, my grandmother was running the place, the Pithod. She was cooking there. And the bands would come, the organ trios. I remember seeing Grant Green and Jimmy McGriff, Johnny Lytle, Kenny Burrell might have been through there too, Jack McDuff and all of those. They came through on a regular basis, and I would sometimes be downstairs when she was there in the afternoon, and the musicians might be rehearsing or arriving, and then I got a chance to see them. And then sometimes occasionally I snuck downstairs, after bedtime with one of my aunties, and I got a chance to see them actually playing and everything, and that's what inspired my earliest memories of the music live, because I went to bed many a night with that organ rumbling up, because she had an apartment upstairs over the club.
Unbelievable.
And I stayed with her occasionally, and then my aunt and some of my father's relatives, I remember house parties where they were playing. They played all kind of music out there, house parties. It was like, rock, rhythm and blues, and then a lot of jazz. And I just remember those late night parties when we would all the relatives would bring the kids. All the kids would be upstairs, and then they would be having a party downstairs, but we would be having our own party upstairs until somebody came up to check on us,
It's funny because...
But those are my earliest memories. And the Townsend Children's Band, that was like a predecessor to my days of the drum and bugle corps. There was a guy named Dave Townsend that lived in our neighborhood that had a radio repair shop, And on the side, he was dedicated to buying used and fixing used instruments and putting together youth march drum and bugle corps, neighborhood marching band drum and bugle corps. That was my earliest memory besides the jazz thing. And a couple of my uncles played. My father was a drummer too, but my earliest memory of actually playing was with the Townsend's Children's Band, and we all used to call it Dave's Band. The guy's name was Dave Townsend. And then from that, I went on into the drum and bugle corps that was sponsored by the VFW and the American Legion in the town. And I also got interested. We lived in the housing project that was multicultural, like it was Greek families, German families, Puerto Rican families, black families, white families, all of them living together in the post-war economy of the northern New York with all Xerox and Stromberg House, and there a lot of people came there for work. Kodak was the center of a lot of that. So that attracted all kind of different people from all working class people. So in that environment, I got exposed to languages, and that's when I first got into hearing Cungas and bongos, the Puerto Rican music. And just in my projects in the building there. And then there was some jazz. There was jazz cats that living in the neighborhood. They would be rehearsing. We always used to hear them in the afternoon coming home from school and stuff.
Could you talk a little bit about your imagination? I think it's so important to talk to younger generations because, like yourself, you'd go down, you'd see glimpses of these guys, playing music, and then you'd go back upstairs, and that organ was just rumbling in your head, but you didn't have a computer to go to say, oh, I want to check this guy out, and then you go to YouTube and see 400 videos. All that was left, the remnants of the night were in your ears, and the rest was left to your imagination. Can you talk about how important imagination was to you consistently creating for decades?
Oh, it was imagination, and then just getting my ass kicked every day, hanging out with the older cats. That wasn't imagination. That was reality.
Can you tell some stories about that?
Now all the young cats are all sensitive and everything. We had to wait to be able to play. I had to wait in line to get my spot in any kind of activity that I participated in musically. So my imagination was go home and practice and imagine that you're going to be one day they're going to say, okay, they're not going to tell you to stop,
Right.
So that was the main thing. And then whatever it took to accomplish that, I mean, you dreamed about that. I had carried my sticks around and getting thrown out of class for pounding on the table in geometry class, all kind of shit, So the imagination was imagining that it could sound like these people, like imagining it could sound like Tito Puente or Mongo, or sound like, Joe Jones or Art Blakey, or even, what's the name? Oh, I'm trying to remember this drummer's name. Joe Dukes.
Yeah, Joe Dukes. Jimmy McGriff's drummer. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Chico Hamilton kind of messed me up, too, because that cat took great solos, So I would just go around and listen to the records, and then you just imagine what can you do inside of that. And then you just have your, dream, like cats dream about being Michael Jordan or some shit, or playing like Kareem. We just dreamed about, I had friends dreaming about everybody had their imaginary, idols, and real and imaginary. And then you just went home every day and faced that ass whipping.
Can you talk about, I agree with you, my generation and younger generations, my daughters, tough kids, but less thick skin. Talk about one of the ass kickings you received that still stands out to you.
Oh, I mean, this was when I was a grown man ass whipping. I was playing with Vaughn Freeman, the Chicago great.
Sure.
He lived until he was like 89 years old. But he took me under his wing, and I used to go by his house all the time and, start studying and absorbing and observing. And he started calling me for gigs, and I even drove him to the gigs. And the one thing, no matter what I did, when I first started working with Vaughn, we would get to the gig, And this piano player, we worked sometimes 4 nights a week in the different clubs on the South Side. We would get to the gig, and at least 2 nights a week, if not all of the gigs, the great pianist John Young would be with the band. And as soon as he seen me coming in, or as soon as he got to the gig and saw me setting up my drums, he would go into a heavy frown and go straight to the bar and go order a double shot. And then he would spend the whole first set waiting for a piano player to come so he could leave the stage and not play with me. And this went on for about 6. This cat didn't even speak to me, man. I mean, he never said nothing. Vaughn was still treating me like I was his son, and it wasn't equality of playing, but I was on the stage with great musicians, so the equality was in the fact of my being there. But John Young never even spoke to me. Plus, we lived in the same apartment building. I used to see him every day. I'd see his wife help her carry up the groceries. I'd see him coming in the morning, going out. He was squeaking everything. I even made him a piano dolly. But as soon as we got to the damn gig, this cat, he acted like he didn't even know me, man.
Did he ever get over?
So then finally after 6 months, for one day he said, start the rhythm and keep it the same at the beginning of the tune and make it the same at the end. And that was it for that shit.
So,
tempo, his main thing was tempo. Plus, this cat could read and play anything. He played with all kind of singers. He played at the Regal. He played shows. He played at trios, all kind of church, everything. So he was like a walking encyclopedia of African American musical traditions, And so the humility of that was that serious ass whipping every time he came in, man. He looked like he was getting ready to get sick or something. So,
it's funny.
That was part of the sight,
No, I mean, I was talking to Lee Oscar, the harmonica player from War, and he talked about being on a bill with Elton John, and War came in, or Isaac Hayes it was. They were doing a double bill, and Isaac Hayes is like, you got 15 minutes. And so they went on and did one of their, Get Down or some funky, break tune. They were just smoking, and this curtain closed, and the audience went nuts, and they wanted more. And Isaac Hayes kept limiting their time, and it was kind of like, Johnny Young, the same thing. It's like okay, here's a young cat, and he's got chops, but he was not going to. I guess that was just. I mean, to me, it's like to have to get up on stage and know that somebody is really not feeling me. You got to block that out and just play. And eventually, I guess he must have. He did come around when he said, "Just start the rhythm," But I mean, in today's day and age, I just can never believe you went up to him. You never went up to him at one point and said, "Hey, man, what's the deal?" You don't dig what I'm doing.
No, I went to all kind of rehearsals and hanging out with cats and following cats around. And basically, you didn't get spoke unless you got spoken to. And it wasn't about your opinion or your feelings or anything. The cats were working on their stuff. You would just glad to be here. Oh, by the way, here's $2. Go get me a pack of cigarettes.
Right. But it's amazing to me
and
because
plus there was like 3 or 4 levels of sitting in jam sessions. So, you start out with the scrub jam session in somebody's house because nobody would go anywhere to hear that. And then you might move up to the next level where it was like, people would come out and hear the band, but they would stop and then they would go to another club with better band. Then you go to the next band place where it's a jam session, but it's actually a house band there playing, getting paid. And then the next level after that was cats coming in from out of town. And, the best cats in town would be hanging out there playing with them, But, I mean, young cats had to go through all of that. It wasn't no thing about going up on it. You didn't go on the stage unless you were ready. Then nobody had to tell you. You knew you had to know yourself if you was ready because it wasn't no trial and error. You didn't do that. You didn't go nowhere where you weren't really honestly ready unless you were invited,
But I guess I want to say this. It's like so you obviously needed to be ready technically and emotionally to get up there, but you weren't necessarily nobody really cared about your feelings or your, how you were doing. Just go buy me a pack of
No,
cigarettes.
they cared about all of that. This is part of the psych because the music requires that.
No, I just want to ask you a question though. It's like,
yeah.
No, I just want to say, you grew up knowing you were still loved. You were loved, and you were taken care of, and so there's this progression from Von Freeman, Sonny Stitt, Dizzy Gillespie, Art Blakey to you turned into I only know you through Spacebook, but it's like you didn't turn out to be a curmudgeon-y guy. I mean, you just grew up knowing that you were cared for and that they were not going to put you out there to make a fool of yourself. And I say, what has happened to the breakdown of the African American family and the leadership within the community because the kids nowadays don't feel love anymore.
Yeah, they don't feel love or connected generally. But I mean, there's a lot of specifics that would counter that statement. But it's a that general. The situation is bad, worse than it's ever been, and then the whole thing of the prison system and the gangs and the inequality, it's bad. The times are bad, but in going back to what I was saying about you had to have a healthy respect for the music, and then there's nothing wrong with being fear. Because I remember that Wilbur Campbell, the great Wilbur Campbell from Chicago, that played with everybody that came through. It was him and Willie Pickens, the piano player, and Rufus Reed had a killer trio around town. And the first time Wilbur Campbell called me to sub for him was New Year's Eve. And I went in, I was scared, man. But I wasn't too scared to play. But the first song they played was the fastest tempo I had ever played in my life, man. Oh. That's how we started the night off. And the cats were laughing, playing like the shit turn on a faucet or something. But I hung in. The lesson I learned from that is you can't not play. If Wilbur Campbell called me to sub for him on the basis of what he had seen me do, whether I knew he had seen me or not, then probably I need to get my ass over there and make the gig and play. I mean, what was they going to do? Be afraid and not take the gig? Tell them no,
No, I agree, and I think back to you're right. What I said was a bit of a general statement, but you're right. The incarceration of so many minorities that have this amazing rhythm ability. I can't imagine how many cats are in jail right now that could just swing and I don't man. It's like I also feel like the infiltration of hard drugs just screwed up horribly. I mean, it made people totally paranoid and ego driven. I mean, I don't know. Coltrane, the stories I hear is that these guys were all doped up because they were playing every night and they were in pain. They didn't have health insurance. They didn't have insurance for their bones. So they had to medicate themselves somehow because they were playing these thesauruses of notes night after night after night. And I just say to myself, I long for authenticity. I long for leadership. And I say, boy, Famoudou is like, he's all the way in France. So all these, do they realize how lucky they are? And where are those cats today? Reggie Workman and those cats, academia. They've put all these cats into academia as opposed to being out.
My friends are in academia. Roscoe is out of California teaching at Mills. And James Newton, Braxton,
right,
Bonnie Barrage. I can go, just a long list of them. But, I mean, that's cool. That's what time it is now, because back in the day, I mean, people could play, I guess, on into the sunset, Now it's like, the sun don't ever set, and, can't keep playing, so you got to do something,
Wow, very poetic. I love that line. I want to ask you a question about.
Go ahead.
Yeah. This is really fascinating to me. Can you talk? I know Oliver Nelson took his band around the time you went to North Africa in the late '60s.
Yeah.
And I really believe, I was thinking about this last night. I'm like, I know that Famoudou went in there head first, and I really would love you to talk about some of the indigenous music that you took hold of, and how that had an impact on your career after that.
Well, the reason I went to North Africa, two reasons. One, because Don Cherry was down there, Ed Blackwell, Randy Weston had a club in Tangiers that was like a lot of people were going through there. So that was when we got to Europe. We were going around to the places where people were where you could actually come in contact with these legendary players. Like Art Taylor was in Paris, Dexter was between Paris and Copenhagen, Philly Joe Jones was in London, so was Don Bias and Coleman Hawkins. Art Farmer was in Vienna. As the list goes on, whatchamacallit was in Lausanne, Switzerland. Lucky Thompson. And Chet Baker was down in and out of Italy and stuff, doing his thing down there. And Mel Waldron was between Munich and Brussels. Pony Poindexter was in Berlin. You had all these great players that were living in Europe and working on the international circuit. But the other reason why I went to Morocco was because I had got hooked into this North African trance music when I was going to school in Detroit. It was a group called Jilala. That was really, I did some research and I met a couple of the North African musicians that had been down there. And then we had a group, the African American Percussion Ensemble, from when I was going to school in Ohio. And the guy that had founded that had lived in North Africa, so I carried that memory with me for 3 or 4 years, and hearing that music, the recordings. And then when I got to Morocco, we hooked up with Randy, but I also spent a great amount of time with the Ganawa musicians down in Essaouira. From Tangiers, we left Tangiers and went to Essaouira, and that's where I really, and between Essaouira and Marrakesh, I heard all the Jalala and the Berber musicians, another whole zone different from Ganawa, because Ganawa was the musicians. They were actually tribal musicians from sub-Saharan Africa that had migrated centuries back up to Morocco, and they brought a different musical tradition and a different percussion feeling with them, you know.
Is there any way for my audience for you to explain? I mean, because I should have let in with the question, because I know that you were playing with these musicians from Ghana with Charles Moore in Detroit before you left. But could you explain how the rhythms were different from the Afro-Cuban or the African rhythms, the drumming rhythms that you had known up to that point?
Well, it's difference in language. Music and rhythm is language. And the secret of that lies is technique and is language and expression too, because the difference between the technique of hand drumming, North African technique, and the Ghanaian tradition, and I can't pinpoint. I just know all of the different. I can't say I know. I know what the differences are just from studying basic rhythm patterns, but all of it's triplet feel. In the end, at the end of the day, and that translates directly into some ching ching ching, ching chicka ching chicka ching 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 for me in the African American pulse, you know.
I think the better question,
like the Senegalese mandingo drumming, difference between mandingo drumming and dagomba from Ghana is night and day. There's so many ways you could emphasize how it's different from the technique, from the language, from the phrasing, from the way they use the music for religious and social purposes, connection to the tribe, and all of that. So and then in Morocco, it's a whole different category when you get up to North Africa, going east through Algeria, through Libya to Egypt, and going towards Lebanon. Like Lebanon got some bad cats there. And between Turkey and Lebanon, with the hand drummers there, with the darbuka and all that, that's another whole. It's hard to capsulize any. But a lot of it is still the triplet feel, with different times. But I always go back to that triplet feel.
And I was going to
say 6/8, you know.
No, I was going to say the dumbeg is very big out in Turkey and the Middle East out there. But I guess the better.
Let me interrupt. One influence besides Ghana, Charles Moore was my jazz mentor in Chicago, in Detroit. I was playing with the African American folklore ensemble. There was some cats from Ghana, but Charles Moore wasn't with that. That was my hand drum thing. I was working on drum set more with Charles Moore at Artist Workshop and at home, and Doug Hammond. So I just wanted to, but you did your homework. You threw in a few things. So anyway, that
no,
was
I mean, if I don't do my homework, I'm going to come in naked, and that's not a good thing. No, I was going to say.
Yeah, well, you wearing a full suit today.
Yeah, I'm wearing my beggar suit. No, I know, but I guess more to the point. How humbled were you by the experience of seeing your own people in Africa? Were there any types of, sort of nuanced moments where you just stood back and said, wow, I had no idea, being that you had spent your whole life in upstate New York and in the Midwest?
No, I was ready when I got there. I did my homework.
Uh-huh.
Because before I went to Africa, I was hanging out with the cats. The North Africa, with Africa is one thing, North Africa is another thing. But I did a little bit of research in North Africa, but I did big research in Paris and in France and Europe before I went to Guinea and Sierra Leone, because I learned some of the language and I learned some of the tradition of the mandingo drum and the djembe and all of that. So when I got to West Africa officially for going there specifically to make an exchange, I had something that I was offering, and I knew exactly what I was looking for. So I went to West Africa in '85 looking for Famoudou Konate, because that was the cat that I had been inspired to. He was one of the great guys, still is one of the great masters, along with Mamadi Keita, Laji Kamara, and Adama Drami. These are all part of the book from Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Mali, Guinea, and Senegal. So, and that was I had a specific focus on that. But prior to that, Olatunji inspired all of us. All the guys that I played with in the jazz scene that played hand drums and stick drums came through major influence from Olatunji in New York when he was connecting with all the jazz cats. Because Olatunji was hooked up with Train and all the scene in New York. So he was a major influence on a whole generation of drummers and hand drummers coming up in the 60s and 70s.
Mm. Did you ever get a chance to see him play with Train?
No. He came to a couple of my shows when we were up there back in the mid-'70s, when our ensemble played at the 5 spot in the East in Brooklyn. We did a whole thing, pioneering venture into New York, and that's where a lot of people came. That's when I actually had a chance to sit down with Olatunji, Rasa Roland Kirk, Milford Graves. All these people would become, those are the, that's what's about the New York scene. You be playing somewhere and you don't know who might be coming in to check you out, I mean, it's like that in Chicago too, or a lot of the town, different places, California, but especially New York. Because I used to be playing, and one time I looked over in the corner and Charlie Persick was over there. I said, "Oh Lord!"
I interviewed that cat. He's
one of my heroes, one of my big heroes.
He gave me a great line. He said, if something doesn't work out, tough tomatoes. That guy's legendary, man. I love that guy.
Yeah, I used to always ask him, man, how old are you, man? Because he's timeless,
I agree. You know what? I know he's definitely. I mean, I just found an album, the Modern Jazz Sextet with Dizzy and Percy Heath, and then there's Charlie Persip. The guy was born in the. He's unbelievable. I am more fascinated with all the cats about your projects, specifically these percussion ensembles that you had. In you said Ohio or Detroit. Where are the tapes of this? I need some tapes of this stuff. I mean, and tell me what
in my archives in Chicago in storage.
I'll take a Greyhound up there and start going through it.
Some years ago,
Could you describe if you were going to play a set, what that music was going to sound like? Was there brass instruments or was it just percussion?
The different possibilities. And in my bands, I always was, because my hookup with the drum corps thing, I was always had an affinity for trumpet and trombone and stuff. So that was resolved and enhanced when I played with Brass Fantasy, and then maybe Oludara and people like Bakita Carroll, different trumpet players I played with. But a lot of we had music specifically written to perpetuate and develop the notion that the drum is a melodic instrument. It's not just playing rhythm. So we did songs. We had different instruments, melodic percussion instruments, because a lot of people, when you say percussion ensemble, a percussion group, they already had a fixed idea that it was going to be a bunch, just drumming, So that was the main perspective, with or without quote unquote melodic instruments, was to feature drum and percussion as rhythm melodic instrument and rhythm melodic expression.
Oh, I'm going to have to marinate on that for a minute.
Yeah, because a lot of people think, like Pieces of Time, the record I made with Andrew Cyril and Kenny Clark, his last record.
Wow. Yeah.
He played that in 1977. Milford Graves, that's not just drums. That's all kind of ballophones and whistles and chanting and field hollers and all that. But that was like an early... See, I played with a band called the Sun Drummers in Chicago, and I also played with another band called the Pharaohs, which that was founded by a great musician named Phil Coran, and a trumpet player, by the way. He played trumpet, harp, and kalimba.
I know that. I can't. Hold on. Are you on? I know there's a couple of really great LPs from the Pharaohs. Were you on those LPs?
I was on the remix of one of them.
Okay, so that was a band
those records were made in the late '60s. There's one dedicated to Malcolm X.
That's right.
And there's another one called the Sphinx. I was on the remix for the Sphinx, but I wasn't in Chicago when they made those original records. I was living in Europe, but the people in the Pharaohs were the original cats that would house band for Muddy Waters and Chess Records.
Wow.
And then they went on. Maurice White was playing with those cats, and a core element of the people from the Pharaohs end up being Earth, Wind, and Fire when they left Chicago, went out to California.
Right. That was.
And then.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say Ramsey interviewed Ramsey Lewis, and Maurice White was his drummer with Cleveland Eaton, and then Maurice was like, I'm going to start a band that plays all music, and Ramsey's like, good luck with that. And pretty soon it was Earth, Wind, and Fire. Yeah.
But see, the trumpet player. The alto player and the trombone player, Don Myrick and Satterfield, when Maurice first started Earth, Wind, and Fire, they were still in Chicago doing studio work and playing with all different kind of cats. But the main commitment at that time, this was like 71, 72, 73, 74, was still to the Pharaohs. And then Hipmo, Don Myrick, and Louis Satterfield, they went out. Maurice eventually called them to come and become the Phoenix Horns. That was the horn section that played with them for the next 10, 15 years, I guess. But we were all together. That was an extension of the mix with between AECM, Eddie Harris, Phil Coran, Willie Dixon, people, Muddy Waters, Howler Wolf, all these cats. When I got to Chicago, it was all of these frontline cats from every different idiom you can imagine coming together and playing their own stuff. But then a lot of times they had groups where they would merge, different cats from different stuff. But the rhythm was a key element for me, learning all of the essence of playing all those different styles and the ass whipping that went along with all of that.
I love it.
'Cause I was young. I was like 20 years old, relatively young. I wasn't that damn young. I was young, and I wasn't old enough to figure out that probably crazy. I was young enough to be crazy enough to try to do this stuff, And then so all I did was just go around. I worked with 7 or 8 different bands, going around all day, every day, rehearsing and playing every night, 7 days a week, with all these different idioms, And Eddie Harris was a big influence on a lot of cats. Vaughn Freeman and Eddie Harris inside the Reed and Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt. They would still come home and give the latest ass whipping for all the young cats.
I love it because it was like it was a hierarchy, but it was a very I don't know. There were, you could, I don't know. It's just all a fantasy to me. I have to ask you. You must have been one of the first cats to write a National Education Association grant for music. 1974, you received a grant from the NEA, and I was wondering how you put that together and what the grant was for.
The grant, I remember the art ensemble got a grant. I don't remember if I got the grant, but I remember the art ensemble. We did got a grant. Actually, the grant didn't come directly to us. Dr. David Wessel with Michigan State University in East Lansing got a grant for us to come there and do a residency, and it was called Undaru, Undaru, and we did a series of concerts there and workshops and things like that. That's my memory of it. I don't specifically remember myself getting a personal grant until Wilbur Ware hooked me up with Orange Teeth News, and I got 10 grand from the National Endowment in 1981, and that was the first and last grant I ever got.
And what was that grant for?
That was grant just like percussion music. I just continued my work with the groups I was working with, and then I put that money into continuation of the fledgling art ensemble label, because I had started the art ensemble record label in 74. And with my first release was 75, I released a solo record, and then we did a solo record from Malachi, a solo record from Joseph. We released Art Ensemble live in Montreux with Moye, and we did a few things on and off after that. We reissued the record. Oh, did I say that? Yeah, the Montreux Festival. When Atlantic Records dropped us after 2 records, we bought the master tapes and reissued Cabalado live with Moye, Richard Abrams.
Oh, wow.
But so a lot of the money I got from the grant, because I called Wilbur, I said, man, what's all these directions? He said, man, just take the money and keep on going. And take it. Just do your stuff. Don't worry. Because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I got, more than what I was doing. So I just put some more records out and did a couple of concerts and sent them the information. I don't remember what the format was in those days, either reel-to-reel or cassette, as I remember. But it was a thing where you had to follow up on the grant and send in something, showing what you had done. So I did it. But basically that was the biggest. The money I got from that, I used that to keep the record label going. And me and Jarman put out Calypso Smile. And we did some more duo things. I did a thing with me and R.E. Brown, saxophonist, and Milton Suggs, the bass player that had played with a lot of people first. He was from Chicago. He had been out on the circuit. Then he moved back, and so we did a couple of live recordings together. And so that was after some of my grant experience, my experience in the funding community,
I really want to talk to you about this because, like you said, you guys were signed to Atlantic in the early 70s. You yourself put out a bunch of albums, but then by the late 70s, disco had crept in to the, freeform radio was a thing of the past. Record labels were shrinking. Radios were getting dumbed down, more homogenized, and everything was being sped up because of disco, because of cocaine and all this stuff. And I'm like, as a drummer, you hear that stuff and it has to somehow get into you internally. And I'm focused on that late 70s period. My question is how did you keep things were you able to hold down a groove and keep it slow so it didn't get so frenetic? Because it seemed like everybody, along with the advent of the drum track, the click track, it seemed like everybody sped up. And when I hear your music, it is patient and it's open and there's space. And I just wonder how you dealt with that change, and if you were even aware of it.
Yep. Hell yeah. Ballads. Started playing ballads. That was my ballad period. With all the people I played with, I would go around in the afternoon. I used to go to Hall's house, Hall Richard Abrams, to work on my brush technique. See, playing rhythm, playing percussion, playing, let me say this. Technique is one thing, but you learn how to interpret rhythm playing with people that are not necessarily drummers, unless you're in a percussion ensemble. Jazz drummers learn how to play time and learn how to express themselves, interpreting the rhythm feeling behind the people they're playing with. They don't learn that from a drummer.
Right.
There's only one drummer on the stage, and if you're working every night, you're learning your craft directly from backing up from providing the rhythmic accompaniment that's required by whoever it is you're playing with. That's one thing I learned. So that's kind of got off the subject, but the main answer to your question, I just went into ballads and played. At that period, I was playing with a lot of African dance companies and Caribbean dance companies going around to Haiti, Guadeloupe, and Jamaica and stuff. So I didn't get caught up too much. I was more moving into calling myself a folk musician as opposed to saying limiting jazz in any kind of category. I was just feeling like I was a folk musician, international, indigenous folk tradition, you know.
And you're still getting your ass whippings too. No, I was going to say.
Yeah. I went to a cat the other day, man. From let's see. Families, 3 or 4 of them from Lebanon. The father is like a master drummer. All of them play all the Lebanese stuff, and that's another whole bag to be in for that. But they've been playing that their whole life, you know. So I always equate the stuff to how does it feel like when you got all your utilities are working. You know, you turn on the faucet, the water is hot. You know, turn on the light switch, thing comes on right away. You know, that's how that feels when the cats hit a certain thing. It's definite. Boom. It happens. You know, there's no sputtering, no fluttering, you know, no waiting around and shit. Any bag that they play in, but from the first note is determined, distinct, the correctness of the thing. And that's something to pursue in every idiom, rhythmic idiom, the correctness of starting the thing off with that, the dynamics, the touch, the feeling, the sound, the context, all of that stuff goes into drumming. But even soloing, you know, captivating an audience in a solo drum context.
I just would like you to talk a little bit to the audience about, you went through this litany of cats who were doing the international circuit. Everyone from Art Farmer to Johnny Griffin. Why did
Bailey, I forgot about him too.
Who's that?
Johnny Griffin. That was one of our heroes.
That's right. No, I was doing some research, but very succinctly, why did those cats leave the States?
Some of them economics. Some of them had to slip out the back door. That's another story. You'd have to get it.
No. Let's go. Let's go there. What do you mean sneak? They were doing. They were under investigation. They had to leave.
You know, maybe child support. You know, some cats had different kind of stuff. Usually not criminal activity. Because I mean, it's hard to be a criminal and be a musician at the same time. Not to be confused with having a habit and doing some dumb shit. But I never met no musicians of any real high level that was like had a criminal side to them, because there ain't no, to be a successful criminal, that's a full-time job, you know.
So it's hard to be a musician by day and a successful criminal by night, or
Well,
vice
no,
versa.
and that's true. And I just interviewed Buster Williams the other day, and he gave me a revelation where John F. Kennedy pardoned Hampton Hawes. I mean, there was a lot of interesting stuff. But but let's just talk about the cats that, like Art Farmer.
But that wasn't necessarily criminal. That was just self-abuse. I know Stan Getz actually broke into a pharmacy in Seattle, and there was armed robbery with a pistol, to get some Peraza. I mean, he didn't get incarcerated or punished for that, but even that case, that was a habit. That wasn't a criminal mind functioning, surviving of out there, like, holding up stores and banks and shit. Stan Getz ain't necessarily a good example, but just as far as criminal-related activity, I don't know that many cats, in my experience, that are actually criminals, according to the way we would define them, go in the period of, those years. Criminals, we knew criminals, knew hustlers, gamblers, pimps and all that, preachers, politics, but didn't really know any musicians that were criminals,
I think that. So let's just take someone like Art Farmer. Like he was cranking out albums on Riverside, and he contemporary. Mm-hmm. But if it boiled down to economics, what does that mean? All of a sudden, he couldn't tour the country. He didn't have any clubs to play at, or was it just the improvisational African American music was received better overseas? It never has really ever found a home, only in certain pockets. Why is that?
All of that? Because you could look, Art Taylor, same thing. He was working with everybody. Train, Miles. He was like Art Taylor's like 150 albums with Riverside or something, And then at a certain point, he left for Europe. He stayed in Europe like 16 years or something, 18 years. Then he came back. I was looking at some stuff from his the other day. But that's the guy I used to go by his house every day when I was living in Paris in the morning. When he was in town, we'd go by there and play long rolls and stuff and, have fresh orange juice and avocado. That's how I started my day off,
Yummy, yummy, yummy.
But, I mean, the economics of whatever was going on in New York at that time probably combined with some personal shit, which may never be revealed. Johnny Griffin, same thing. He left the States. I know he probably had domestic problems and everything, but, I mean, you would have to get that. Whatever I know is all those cats, when they got to Europe, they were working a lot. Now, I don't know what Johnny Griffin was doing at the time he left the States, but he was like the king of Paris when we got there. He was Dexter and them cats. They were like Slide Hampton, Don Bias, Ben Webster. I played with him in Copenhagen in '68. I met Don Bias there too, and Dexter was in town. And it was a lot of J.C. Moses.
Sure.
Living in Copenhagen then. But let's see, I kind of drifted
off.
No.
I just wonder what you think about when you see these petty.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Are you still there?
You were breaking up there.
I see these petty disputes in our country now, the treatment of our president, a whole lot of things going on, and I say a lot of the time I hear that these cats, Kirk Lightsey or yourself, it was treatment. It was the way you were being treated, and you just didn't like it, and you just said, "I'm sick of it," and I want to make sure that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here. I got health issues, and France got the best between France and Canada, and a couple of other places got the best health care programs in the world. I mean, I pay my way, but as far as the quality of the care and the quality of the post-operation, rehab and all that stuff, I probably wouldn't be able to afford that if I was in the States,
Right.
Because I had 2 hip operations and a carpal tunnel, and then a ruptured Achilles tendon, all that stuff. I was in rehab programs, a heated pool, and kinesiology treatments and follow up and everything. That's part of the reason that I came here and stayed here. But I was in Morocco. I went to Morocco first.
Mm.
And I was down there, and I started there in 2010. I went to play at Casablanca, and then I got a gig with. I had some students down there, and I had a gig with Forum of Organizations Laïque, which is like interdenominational cultural organization, which combines all the different Muslims, Christians, Jews, non-denominational. Then they had all these people taking classes: music, dance, theater, writing, languages, and everything. So that was right in line with some of my interests, with languages being one of them, because I've been studying several languages my whole life, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say you're so articulate. Your education is we didn't touch on that, and quite honestly, Famoudou, I'm just hoping that we can be in touch for part 2, because my student.
I didn't know how. Would you like to get a word in edgewise? Because I went drifted off.
This is people say to me, what are you doing? I said, nobody wants to hear me espouse at 36 years old all my wisdom. I glean it from you and Babatunde and all the other cats because, listen, we need to know where we came from in order to know where we're going. So I don't consider I only consider, one final question for you. We only communicate. We know each other through Facebook, but what is it about my show and the eccentric transcriptions that I put up that you like so much?
Eclectic. Cover a lot of territory. And not limited, not bigoted, not limited, not narrow-minded. I mean, it's all kind of cast. I read some of the things, different people that I wouldn't have normally have come in contact or knew anything about in any kind of detail. Even in the small, the parts you put in the Facebook page, so I said, damn, this cat covered a lot of territory. So that's a sign, open mind, open, like I said, eclectic,
I dig. Listen, I'll call you.
Of eclecticism within the vector of plasticity.
Famoudou, thank you so much. I'll be in touch with you later.
How was that?
Say it one more time. The vector of eclecticism.
The aesthetics of eclecticism within the vector of plasticity.
That's it, baby. Maybe we'll just shoot some emails to solidify part 2 because there's just too much. We just have to get to more. There's many chapters to write.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, man.
Exactly.
But you hit a few good spots. Along the way. You did your homework, which is always a relief. It's always fun when cats do have some in-depth analysis of the thing.
Hey, aesthetics.
So I'm happy for that. That's what I'll say in closing. Beyond the vector of plasticity, it was in-depth analysis.
Peace and blessings. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man.
All right now.
Bright moments.
Okay. Good enough. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see you all in a little bit.